Hey there, 6th grade. This is the last video in our unit over percents, and in this video we're going to take a look at simple interest. So some of you may have heard of this term interest before, maybe you haven't. If you haven't, then I'll go ahead and explain what that is here in the beginning of this video. When you keep money in a savings account, your money typically earns what is called interest. And interest is simply the amount that is collected or paid for the use of money. So for example, if you're putting your money in a savings account at a bank, the bank will typically pay you money in return in order to use your money to conduct its business. And then at the same time, if you borrow money, let's say when you go to buy a car someday or a house, then you typically have to pay more money than what you borrowed originally, and that more money is what's called the interest. Okay, you're paying someone additional amounts of money for the service of them giving you money up front. So what we're going to do today is just talk about what is called simple interest. And simple interest is money that is paid only on the principal. The principal, when we're talking about money, is the original amount of money. Okay, it's the original amount of money that was either deposited in your account or possibly borrowed, let's say for a house. Okay, so simple interest is money that you pay on that original amount. So lots of vocabulary up here. If you have any questions over those vocabulary terms, make sure you ask your math teacher next time you're in class. Now we're going to talk about the formula for calculating simple interest. So the formula is listed here below. It's I equals P times R times T. And so we're going to label what each of these variables means. The I stands for the interest. The P stands for the principal. Remember, that's the original amount of money. The R stands for the rate, and that is, when you're using the formula, given as a decimal. And then the T stands for the time, and we measure the time in years. So we're going to practice using this formula here in the examples below. In each of the examples, I've given you 3 out of the 4 values here, either the I, the P, the R, or the T, and then I'm asking you to find the missing value. So for number 1, we're being asked to find I in this formula. We're being asked to find the amount of interest. And then I've given you the principal, which is $225, the rate, which is 3%, and the time, which is 2 years. So anytime you're using a formula, I highly recommend that you write the formula back down as it is originally given. So this one is I equals P times R times T. That helps your brain memorize that formula each time you write it down. And so what we're going to do is we're going to substitute the values that we already know in for these variables. So we know that P is 225. We know that R is 3%, but remember we have to put R in as a decimal when we use the formula. So this 3% here as a decimal would be 0.03. So that's what I'm going to plug into my formula. I'm not going to put 3 in, I'm putting in the decimal version of 3%, 0.03. And then T, the time, is 2 years, so that's times 2. So the missing value I is going to be equal to 225 times 0.03 times 2. Okay, remember multiplication, you can do multiplication in any order, so I'm going to do 225 times 2 first. And 225 times 2 is 450. and then I'm going to take 450 times 0.03. And if I do that correctly, I should get 13.5. And remember what we're measuring here. Interest measures money, and so that means that if your original amount of money is $225, your interest rate is 3%, and the time period is 2 years, the amount of interest that you either pay or is paid to you is $13.50. So if you go to a bank and you deposit $225 in a savings account for 2 years, and the interest rate is 3%, this is how much money you'll have this is how much money in interest the bank will pay you. So they'll give you $13.50 additional to that $225 you put in there originally. Okay, let's look at number 2. We're using the same formula, so write that down again. I equals P times R times T. This time I gave you the interest. The interest amount is $300, so I'm going to put that in place of I. So it's 300 equals, I gave you the principal. The principal is $1,000, so we'll put that in for the P value. The R value is what you don't know, so I'm going to leave that as an R here. And then the T, the time, is 5 years, so that's going to be times 5. So for this problem, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the 300 alone for just a moment. And this is 1,000 times R times 5 on the right side of this equation that we have. Remember, multiplication we can do in any order. So I can rearrange this so that it's 1,000 times 5 times R. And just switch my R and my 5 around. And we know what 1,000 times 5 is. 1,000 times 5 is 5,000. So this becomes 300 equals 5,000 times R, or 5,000 R. Now, how do we solve this equation for R? We've done this before. Problems like this, we need to undo the multiplication here. So it's 5,000 times R. We need to divide by 5,000 on the right side and the left side in order to undo that multiplication and solve for R. So we get R equals 300 divided by 5,000. And let's use our mental math here. We know that 300 and 5,000 are both divisible by 10. So if I divide those both by 10, that makes this 30 over 500. If I divide those by 10 again, 30 and 500, that gives me 3 over 50. So I get 3 over 50 for R. When you're solving for R, you want to give that number as a percent. Okay, when I'm asking you to find R, give that as a percent. So how would we turn 3 over 50 into a percent? Well, we can multiply 50 by 2 to make it 100, and then do the same thing on the top for the 3. So this becomes 6 over 100, or 6%. So that means that if your interest is $300 and your principal was $1,000, over 5 years, the interest rate had to be 6%. Okay, going to the back side, one more problem. This one says that Olivia deposits $7,000 in an account that earns 7% simple interest. About how long will it take for her account balance to reach $8,000? Okay, so we're going to start with our formula. I equals P times R times T. And the first thing that we're going to do in this problem is we're going to list the 3 values that we know. Remember, there will always be 1 you don't know and 3 that you do know. So I'm going to list my different variables over here. I, P, R and T, and identify the ones that I know and the ones that I don't know. Let's start with the one that I don't know. What's the question asking us to find? The question is asking us to find about how long. Okay, how long will it take? That's referring to the time. And so the one we don't know in this problem is the t value. So that's my question mark here. Now let's move on to the principal. Okay, what was the original amount of money that we deposited, or Olivia deposited, in the account? Well, it tells us that at the beginning. She deposits $7,000. Okay, so that's the principal right there, is $7,000. The rate, it tells us, is 7%, and 7% as a decimal is 0.07. So R is going to be equal to 0.07 for this problem. The interest, you have to be careful here and think a little bit. The only other number in the problem is 8,000, but read that carefully. It says, about how long will it take for her account balance to reach $8,000? Well, she already has $7,000 in the account. So the interest that she gets is not 7,000, it's 8,000 minus the original amount, 7,000, and that is a difference of 1,000. So that's the interest. Okay, it's the principal plus the interest to get the new balance. So the interest is actually 1,000. Okay, so now that I've identified my three variables, I'm going to plug each of those into this formula. So it's 1,000 equals 7,000 times 0.07 times t. Okay, for this problem, I'm just going to pull out the handy-dandy basic calculator, since we've been using that for time here and there. So I'm going to start out by doing 7,000 times 0.07 over here on the right side of the equation. And that gives me 490. So this is 490 t on the right side. On the left side, it's just the 1,000. And now I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by 490 to solve for t. So I'm doing 1,000, my numerator, divided by 490, and I get the decimal 2.04. 2.04 approximately. Now the question asked about how long. 2.04 is really close to 2, and so that means it takes about 2 years for her account balance to go from $7,000 to $8,000. Okay, if you had any questions over this video, 6th grade, make sure you ask those the next time you're in your math class. Until then, have a nice day. You're all wonderful people, and take care.